You gonna take that off, or?
Nope.
You're definitely gonna take that off.
Okay.
For real, I'm gonna have to get a hanky like a...
Mr. Hanky?
Like a 75-year-old man. What the heck? Oh, please don't edit that out. I want everybody to see that glorious. For Dave. All right. So.
Here's where your teeth.
I'm gonna have to shove a Q-tip or something in my nose. I can't. I'm about to lose my mind.
Go ahead.
All right. So this week's episode of Real Talk with Team Cook, is that what we decided? Okay, cool.
Sounds cooler.
Whatever. Nothing we do is cool. We have 2 kids. This week's episode is going to be on post-show dieting. This is really geared specifically towards athletes. There's a topic in this video about reverse dieting. It can be used for people who are not athletes, but for the purposes of what we're talking about, we're going to be specifically referring to competitive physique athletes. If you go look up a podcast on this stuff, you're going to find stuff from 60 minutes to, hour and a half, even longer. And we're going to try to condense it down as much as we can and make this as short as possible for you guys. But no promises that it's not going to be under half an hour. Post-show dieting. The first thing I want to say about this is for athletes, it's totally individual, case-by-case basis. It depends on how lean someone is. Do they have another show coming up? Their personality type. How do they handle low calories? All these things matter. So it really is individual to the athlete, and you need a coach or someone who can guide you through your post-show diet. If you're an athlete and you're going into a show and your coach has not even brought this up with you or said, hey, we need to have this conversation, you need to bring it up with them and say, I need to know what I'm doing after this show happens, because if you've never done it before, you're in for a rude awakening if you think you're going to step off stage and then you're just done working with your coach. If your coach tells you that, then you need a new coach. And if another coach watches this and offended, sorry, you should start helping your athletes with their post-show nutrition. Essentially, we tell our athletes, when you come off stage, you're still in prep for another 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks, depends on the athlete and what their game plan looks like after the show. But the reason this post-show dieting nutrition is so important is for mental and emotional health. It's not just for your physical health. Obviously, you want to prevent excessive fat gain after your show. Several people come off stage, they diet down, they lose 30 plus pounds, and then within 3 weeks they've gained 30, even 40, plus pounds, and it just sends them into a nightmare. And I'm going to go back to mental and emotional health in a minute and let Marianne talk about what a lot of people call as post-show blues. I've never really dealt with that. I think I just had I don't know why I didn't deal with it. I guess it's probably less of an issue for males. Yeah, and I just was prepared. I'd been following the sport for so long before I competed, for over a decade, that I had read about it and learned about it. But people that have never competed and don't know what to expect, it can really mess you up. And so the whole purpose of a good post-show diet is to set yourself up for a successful growth season. But in order to do that, I think you have to know what's coming. So I want you to just touch on, what you and other people have said, I'm having post-show blues, or whatever that means to you or to someone else, an athlete that you've worked with.
Yeah, this is not something that I've experienced personally. I'm kind of like you.
A meathead?
Yeah. And when I'm done with my show prep, I look forward to gaining weight and lifting heavy and setting new PRs. I'm excited for the growth part of the next season, because that's what bodybuilding is to me. But when I first started competing, I didn't work with my coach post-show, and they never mentioned it. They never expected me to. Nobody knew anything about that, I think. But now you're seeing more people pop up talking about how they're not happy with how much weight they're gaining. They don't know how fast to gain it, how much they're supposed to gain. They don't know how much is fat, how much is muscle. They don't know what their calories should be. They don't know how to taper back down in cardio. And they're just not happy with their bodies. They're so used to seeing new changes in their body throughout the prep. They like their abs. They like, their physique as a whole, and just seeing it slip away, so to speak, like, is just not a good feeling to them. And so they just try and hang on to it as long as they can. But, I just try and tell people, like, when you're entering your off season, like, you need to look forward to all the good things about lifting heavy and making changes, because you don't want to get back on stage and look the exact same or worse because you're just killing your body, dieting over and over and over again and never giving it time to rest. So, I see a lot about post-show blues, but I do think it is good that some people are speaking up about it, because it lets people know, like, they're not alone.
Yeah.
Because some people really do hide it and never compete again because they don't know how to get out of it.
Yeah, there's definitely a problem with this. It's an emotional disorder almost, where you think, especially with our athletes, you spend, you have guys that do short preps, but these long dieting phases of 14, 20, 30 plus weeks in a diet, and like, you're just so focused on your goal, getting on stage, and you finally get on stage, and then you come off stage and it's like, well, what am I tracking my food for now? Or what, why am I still sacrificing all this? I've already competed, and they don't feel like they have anything else to do. And I think that's why some people, generally females, but some people get trapped in that compete, because they feel like if they don't have a show that they're getting ready for, then they have nothing to diet for or to do anything. And so really understanding the purpose of your off season, or your improvement season, or your growth season, whatever you want to call it, and how your post-show dieting can set you up successfully for that is important. So that's one thing that we try to hammer on our athletes, is this is why this is so important right now. And I've had people that, I will never call anybody out, but I've had people that did it wrong, and they thought, whatever, they take it as a grain of salt, and then 40 pounds later, they're like, wow, I flubbed that up, didn't I? And then we have to fix it, which is okay. As a first-time competitor, it's more likely to happen, and it's generally a serious issue with new athletes. As you become more experienced, you understand the purpose of that improvement season, so you want to set yourself up best for that. And one thing that I just want to add, this is kind of really random, but I wasn't sure where to put it in the video. If you were a first-time athlete and you just got off stage, I actually had this conversation with a competitor this week, you're going to be hungry. You're supposed to be hungry. That doesn't mean your metabolism is revved up. It's actually the opposite. So when you diet down for such a long time, your hormones and metabolism just get all out of whack. So you have two different hormones. You have ghrelin, which is your hormone that says, hey, I'm hungry, eat. And then you have leptin, which is your hormone that says, I'm satisfied, don't eat. Well, you've driven your metabolism down in the dumps. Your ghrelin is really high, so it's just eat, and your leptin is really low, so it's never satisfied. It's never saying, hey, I'm full. And it causes a binge eating disorder if you can't recognize that and you think, well, I'm hungry, so my metabolism must be really high. I just need to keep eating. And then the scale starts going up, and then generally what happens is people see 10 pounds in 3 days, and they're like, oh, no. Now I need to diet, and I need to do extra cardio, and they get into this yo-yo effect, and it's, cut food out, restrict, do a lot of cardio, and then they suffer another binge, and they start eating, and it's very unhealthy. It can cause very bad relationships with food, and if you're an athlete who's experiencing that, you need to go get help. You need to see a counselor or talk to a coach, something. Don't feel like you're by yourself, and you can just get on Instagram and type in post-show blues, and you'll probably find some stuff. But not to get too far off track, there's two main types of post-show dieting that you see if you do any kind of research. And the first one that came out, it's reverse dieting. A reverse diet is generally much more strict. It's much slower. It keeps you in a caloric deficit. And basically what happens is you add very small amounts of calories week to week. And so like if you say you have an athlete and they're down, say it's a small female athlete, she's down to 1,200 calories a day. After the show, you might give her 1,300-ish, 1,350, but then from there on out, it's, and that's generous from what I've read, most of the guys that use reverse dieting, but then it's 1,400. and then the next week it's 1450, and then the next week it's 1500. And people don't realize like 50 calories is not a lot of food.
Yeah.
You know, that's a couple grams of carbs and fat here and there, and that's it. And so you feel like you're still very restricted. But the good thing is, if you have an athlete who wasn't quite lean enough for a show and they do this, they could continue to get leaner. It's a very effective dieting method if someone can do it. But it's more likely to be successful with very advanced, experienced athletes than a first-time athlete they just got off stage, they crossed the finish line, and they're like, wait a minute, you mean I still can't go binge eat every day or eat what I want every day? And so most athletes post-show, it's, hey, eat whatever you want on Saturday night. I don't care if you eat until you can't stand up. Whatever, you earned it. I'm good with that. Sunday, eat 3 big meals. If you want IHOP for breakfast and then Pizza Hut for lunch and Pizza Hut for dinner, I don't care. That's fine. But Monday, you're back on your plan tracking. It's just like being in prep. And you have to tell people, like, hey, I really can't afford to do this yet. 6, 8, 10 weeks from now, I'll be able to go have cheat meals with you way more regularly. But right now, 1, I need this for my health, and 2, my coach needs it for data so that we know what kind of adjustments I need to make to set myself up so that I can improve in my off season. Another thing is, with a reverse diet, you're likely to have your next show in mind. Right. Most people, they know that there's another show coming up. Whereas, like, when I was in Arizona and I got back to maintenance almost, probably faster than most of the athletes I know, I knew I wasn't competing for 3 or 4 years, and I felt like complete dog crap. So it was like I wanted to eat, I wanted to get my calories back up, and I went off the handle for pretty much 4 days. And then when we came back, I dialed it back in and started my, what some people would call recovery. But even then, it was so loose that it took me an extra 4 or 5 months to really feel healthy again. And so even as an experienced athlete, if you don't do what you know is right, you're going to pay the price. Do you want to talk about reverse dieting at all? I know we don't do a lot of that unless somebody just really needs to. We have an athlete right now that we're doing it with, and it's going really well. But most people, in my experience, psychologically, they just have a much harder time handling that.
That's true. And what I was going to say is that it looks very good on paper. If you can get someone to truly stick to it. Like if you were to do a science experiment and control every single variable,
controlled study, very
slowly coming out of it, like you said, you could either get leaner or stay very lean while getting your calories very high, which is, that's the good part about this. It's very optimal, so that way you can continue growing without gaining as much fat and making your next prep, whenever that is, not having to be as long. So, but we're human.
Yeah.
Your test subjects are not always going to do it just right. So, if you can do it right, if you've had experience doing it, it could be very beneficial. For me, though, I don't like forcing myself to stay in a deficit for too much longer. The first couple weeks, yes, are very delicate, and you're getting out of that point. But I like to get there a little bit quicker, which brings us to our next post-show dieting method. So as opposed to instead of a reverse, we call it a recovery diet. And this is where you're actually going to take a little bit bigger of a leap right after your show. So I'll let you talk about exactly how much. This can vary drastically from person to person based on how lean they were and what their maintenance calories may be.
Yep. And so this term was kind of coined, if I'm correct, I'm pretty sure I am. It was coined by a group of coaches, I think they're in the UK, called 3DMJ. They may not be in the UK, but it's Eric Helms, Alberto Nunez. There's a bunch. They're top coaches, and they realized that with reverse dieting, a lot of people struggle with that because, like Marianne said, not everybody we're not robots. So, there's a few people out there who can. They're to the plan all the time, but a lot of people can't do that, especially after a show. So their goal was to take someone like me, for instance. In my off season, I'm 200 to 215, depending on where I'm at in my off season, and on stage I'm 178 to 182 pounds. And when I get to that 178 mark, I'm miserable. My testosterone is super low. I did blood work in my last prep. Like I mentioned before, your hormones are all out of whack. And what their goal with this recovery diet is to get your calories up faster, not just blow it out. I need to make it very clear that this is still tracked. It takes a lot of discipline, but it's just a faster approach to get you feeling normal again so that you can get into that growth season faster. So how much is very individualized to that athlete, how well the coach knows that athlete, what they can handle, where they started in their last prep, or how high they got in their off season. It helps to have as much data as possible. But essentially what I would recommend people to do is use some sort of calculation. There's plenty of them out there, but determine what someone's maintenance calories are at their stage weight and still don't even go that high. Get close to that, but you'll know if it's reasonable or not looking at the numbers if you're a decent coach. If you look at somebody's calories and their current maintenance from their stage weight is, 2.5 times what they're doing right now, you're obviously not going to take them that high. But you give them enough to where you think they're not going to feel starving around the clock. And then you also just have to communicate with your athlete and ask them, like, how is your hunger? How are you feeling? How is your energy? And the other thing is with increased calories, if they're able to track their own food, they can start writing in things that are a little more flexible that way. So if they've been stuck eating very basic, nutrient-dense foods because their calories were so low, now that their calories are higher, they can write in some of the things that they were doing earlier on in prep or even in their last off season. And if they kind of swerve off plan a little bit, it's not the end of the world for someone that's doing a recovery diet, mainly because they most likely don't have another show in the foreseeable future. So we have 2 athletes that competed in the last 2 weeks, Matt and Prel. They both earned their pro card, and they're going to take some serious time off. We don't know when they'll compete again. And so with them, I was like, hey, we're going to do a recovery diet. We're going to get your calories up relatively fast, but without gaining excess weight. Neither one of these you want to be, back to your preseason or early prep weight immediately, 5, maybe 10 pounds at most for a male in your first week or 2, and then you're just slowly adding after that. But because they don't have a show coming up, I want to get their calories high. I want them to, go ahead and get to where they can train hard, feel good, have their hormones back to normal. And then the other thing with the recovery diet, in my opinion, I don't have any evidence for this other than anecdotal experience. Athletes are usually much less likely to develop a binge eating disorder as long as they're disciplined. Now, if you say, hey, I'm going to take your calories from 1,500 to 3,000, they're going to have a freaking field day with that 3,000 because it's just too much. They're going to start writing in whatever those cookies are. I can't remember those fat and weird,
if my calories doubled
cookies.
overnight, I wouldn't even track.
Yeah, that's what happens.
Like,
people
what's
are like,
the
well,
point? You just
So there's a fine line,
That's too much
and like I said, I can't give numbers because it's very individualized to the athlete. But those are your two major differences between different types of post-show dieting, and then you have the people who don't do anything afterwards and they just don't track, and then they end up with binge eating disorders, or they're, I don't want to say fat, but I mean they gain so much body fat that Eric Helms is a good person to go look up and listen to him talk about his first show, because after his first show, I think he gained like 40 or 50 pounds. And you'll see there's coaches and athletes out there that like justify this stuff, or they try to, and they're like, oh yeah, but you need that to be able to grow. And it's just really unhealthy what it does to your mindset and your relationships with food, and it's not good for your hormones and your metabolism. You're already primed to gain fat faster at the end of a show prep anyway, if you're show ready. That's the other thing, is this stuff is really dictated on being show ready.
Yeah, that's true, because I've had somebody who was finishing a show prep with a different coach, and when she started working with us, we waited a year to start her next prep, and through her reverse, she lost weight the entire year.
Yeah, and she was nowhere near ready. I mean, that's not a knock on her. She just, there's just had a coach that was just trying to put somebody on stage to say they were a coach. And I know exactly what you're talking about. But that happens. And we have an athlete right now who just competed for the first time. She looked great. She won her open class, but she wants to be leaner and she wants to look better. The problem is we had to diet really, really, really hard for a really long time, especially with COVID.
Yeah.
And she really wants to compete next year. And, you know, if you had asked me 8 weeks ago, 10 weeks ago, I'd have said, hell no. There's no way you're competing next year. You need to recover. But, I mean, she's one of those people that I talked about where she's like a robot, you know.
Plus, she has enough muscle to not
she can
desperately
afford,
need time off.
And she's handling her reverse well. You know, people are asking her to go do stuff, and she's like, hey, I really can't. You know, she just has that mentality that you need to have to successfully do a reverse dieting method, and that's what we're doing. And so I don't want to drag this out any longer. There's so much more to unpack with this, but, you know.
Well, I do want to add real quick well, I mean, personally, we kind of do a blend of both, where we give a nice jump and then we kind of like inch our way up. But I think it's worth talking very quickly about how you know you're done.
Okay.
Because I think some people might get a meal plan or something from their coach post-show and think that's it. Or maybe do it for 2 weeks, maybe a month, get another plan, and then they think that's it. But I'll give Julia as an example. I think we're probably 2 months post-show, something like that.
Yeah, 8 weeks.
And we're actually not even at what we wanted her to, we're not to her limit, I'll say, yet. We're close to it, but she's...
Weight-wise.
Yeah, her
calories.
weight, and she's kind of been very stable for the last, I would say, 3 weeks. So each week we've been increasing a little bit. Her body doesn't even know the difference. Mm-hmm. It's awesome. It's really, really good. We got a nice jump right off the start. We're inching back up. I would say we're pretty much done reversing, but at this point, because her strength is totally back, her joints feel healthy. She's, doesn't feel like she's restricting herself. So at this point, we are going to continue increasing calories, but I would say her hormones are balancing out very nicely. So I would say, I don't know, for 8 weeks post-show, something like that.
Either way, some people can do it in 4, and some people, it'll take 16 weeks. Everybody's just different.
As far as like your hunger and those things go, but like with your hormones, sometimes that doesn't necessarily have to do with your calories or your weight. It has more to do with how much time it has been since the show.
Yeah.
Because sometimes your body just needs to rest before it knows when it's ready. So. Yeah, you look like you're going to sneeze.
I've been holding off the sneeze for however long this video is. Yeah, that long.
Okay.
And so the only thing I want to add, I want to mention some key takeaway points, especially for athletes. Number one, if you don't have a plan, you need to make a plan. And if you don't have someone to help you make that plan, you need to have data or good data that you can contact someone and say, hey, this is what I did for my prep. I need help reversing so that I don't screw this up. Either method that you choose to use or your coach decides to use, they'll both work. I'm not going to say that either one is better than the other because it's so individualized. Both of them are going to require discipline. You are still going to feel like you are in contest prep for another 6, 8, 10, 12, however many weeks it takes for you and your coach to get you where you guys think you're in a good place to go into what you would consider your growth season or your improvement season. Neither one of these methods allows you to just stop tracking your food and just eat what you want to eat and not measure anything. That's not an option. And the biggest thing is if you are struggling in your post-show diet or just your post-show phase with mental health, emotional health, whatever it is, ask for help. Because I see these posts on Instagram where these people who are like, oh, I did one bodybuilding show and it was the worst thing ever and it ruined me and I'll never do it again, and it just gives the sport a bad name. And I guarantee
see that with people who are very successful and compete in 2 or 3 or 4 shows. And then they fall off the face of the earth, and a year later they're like, saying how cool it was, but it ruined my mind and my body and my relationship with food. And it's like,
and
I don't think that's bodybuilding's fault.
Most of the people that I see this from, I'll intentionally go back and stalk their page. And like 7 months before that post was a post on Show Day about how great it was and how thankful they were for the sport, for helping them learn how much discipline they had. And it's just praise, praise, praise.
And now they're ready to go eat.
They don't do their part for the next 10 weeks. And now instead of just taking extreme ownership and saying, yeah, I messed that up and now I'm having to suffer and fix it, they want to blame everyone else. And in part, it is probably their coach's fault for not helping them, but you can't be mad at the sport for that. And the other thing is, if you don't know that it's coming, it's really hard to be prepared for it. So just be ready for that and get help. For God's sakes, go see a counselor or something.
Yeah.
I mean, don't.
So, obviously after your post-show diet, once you get back up to maintenance, you enter your off-season.
Next week,
that is going to be our topic, since we have so many going into it, and I just think it's something that not many people talk about. In bodybuilding, everybody wants to talk about dieting and competing, and so I think this is going to be a good one. So if you guys have questions about off-season training, off-season nutrition, anything like that, let us know.
The importance of an off-season, why an off-season.
Yeah, all the things.
Are you going to go hit stop, or?
Yeah, I can do that.
Hey, wait, you don't have pants on.
I do. I do.
I was just joking.
I don't have my boot on, though.
You don't have your boobs on?
Boot. Your head's cut off.
Are you kidding me?